Hey guys, April Kamara here. So I just wanted to do this post today because there was like something on my heart that was just saying like there's a part of my story that I don't think I've really shared with people and that I think is like super not really as much unique, but like it just needs to be heard, especially like right now. Especially because I'm a mom and I just like see it playing out, and I've like had these situations where like you think of children as like problem children, right? And when you think of kids as problem children, they usually like give you what you expect. Like I think my stepsister, who's a counselor, she has this like book called like The Little Seed or something like that, and it was just how like one little seed went from being a bad seed to a good seed. And it was all based on like how people saw the seed, right? And it's the same thing with children, right? So like children are like these divine reflections that we have. They literally like show us, like bring, especially in parents, they bring up the stuff that we're dealing with that we don't want to see, right? Like I see it in my son all the time, like I can see him when he's like acting, really fussy, and it's like because I'm on the inside anxious and I'm just trying to avoid it. So kids are like these divine reflections, and then on top of that, like I specifically remember being like a problem child, okay? Like I was a really good kid, like I loved everyone, right? But then like when my ego came in, it was kind of like I started seeing the problems with everything, and I started looking at it as like from a victim mindset. So what that means basically is that, oh, someone needs to fix this for me, and I'm a kid, so that's understandable, right? Like someone needs to fix this for me. Someone needs to like, the world should be better than this. What's wrong with the world? And I got like really bitter and like really frustrated and really kind of like depressed because I was like, what the heck is wrong? Like I thought grown-ups were supposed to have it together. And I knew from a young age that most grown-ups didn't have it together. But at the same time, I was just like, I wanted someone to save me because I felt so out of control. And I felt like, I knew I was this good kid before and that good was still in me. But I was like acting out and I was like getting in arguments and I was like fighting, right? So like the phase of victim mentality goes like this, and I just like want to relate it to problem children because I believe that problem children are like here to save the world. Like we see children as like problems because like they trigger us, but truly like they're here to tell us the truth. They're here to like bring to the light the stuff that isn't working, and they're here to truly just like be a divine reflection for everyone else who's gotten too used to like the things that really aren't that good with the world or aren't that good with the systems that we have in place. Specifically for me, what I was a problem child for was school. I hated school. I hated that school was like this place where they told you where to think and they told you what to wear, and I just didn't like it. I didn't understand it. And I didn't understand how like the teachers weren't as knowledgeable as I thought they should be and things like that. If I asked a question that wasn't in the book, they couldn't tell me. And those things just frustrated me, right? And so I was like getting so frustrated. I was like quote unquote this like problem child. But the truth of the matter is that like I was literally just trying to show people that things weren't working, and I didn't know how to do that without like throwing a fit, or I didn't know how to do that without like, acting out in whatever way. I remember specifically like I was at a friend's house and we had like a few people over, and there was this kid who was like really, really bad. Like he was so bad, but he was so adorable. Like I loved him, right? And so like someone mentioned about how bad he was, and I just like stuck up for him. I was like, no, I love that kid. Like he's a good kid, And I was like, I was like that when I was a kid, Like you just don't know. You don't know like what's going on, And usually it's coming from something deeper. It's coming from this like desire really to make things better, but just as a kid you don't know how, so you just react. And like we as adults are like meant to like watch our kids, and when we see them, like understand where they're coming from, and like when we're triggered by them especially, do the work behind it. So, like, the phases of victim mentality, like how I went through it, right? It's like you play the victim, meaning that, like, everything outside of you is out to get you, right? As a kid, you have, like, no control. Like, your parents tell you what to do. Your teachers tell you what to do. The school has these rules. You have to follow these rules. And so, like, you create, it almost, like, I'm not saying it creates a victim mentality, but, like, for people who are seeing, for kids who are like empaths or whatever, who are seeing that there's something wrong and they feel like they don't have control because they're having to do what everyone else tells them, even though it's not always the best thing, you can go into this victim mentality, which is like, everything outside of you is kind of like out to get you. But then it goes through this phase of like, you go from victim, right, to where, oh, I can't do anything about it. And then you get tired of being in that victim, hopeless place, and then you start like fighting back. So that's when like kids go from like, oh my God, what's wrong, to like acting out, right? It's like they're seriously just trying to like find a way to fight through what they know isn't 100% right, but they just don't know how. And I know me specifically, I would do that by just like, lashing out at my parents, lashing out at my teachers, because I was just like, this is not right. right? But I went from victim to like fighting, and like the fighter in me was just like pretty much throwing up these walls because it didn't believe that, like I still believed that something was out to get me and I had to like fight my way through it. But you get tired as a fighter, you know, like you get to this point where you're just like exhausted. You know, for me, that didn't come till I was probably like, I don't know, like 16 to 23. I'm not even kidding you guys. Like I was freaking like, I was like ready to go. I was like, no, this needs to change, right? But you fight for so long and then you just realize like, okay, something else, I have to do something else because this isn't working. So once you fight for so long, then you start to see, okay, I don't need to fight my way anymore, especially as a kid, right? Like, I don't need to fight my parents. I don't need to fight these systems. I don't need to fight these things. Maybe I need to learn something. And that's when you go into more like the creator role. And the creator role is that saying like, okay, you're taking responsibility for what you can do, and you're choosing to create something different within inside yourself. So that's when people start acting differently, as in like, okay, the world isn't out to get me, you know, like I need to control what I do and what I react no matter what happens around me, because I'm tired of being reactive. Like the fighter is reactive, which is better than the victim, right? Which is just hopeless and not doing anything or feeling like, you know, the world is out to get me. But the fighter is so reactive that you just get tired. And then once you get tired, you move to the creator, where it's like you stop trying to fight everything without you and realize that the only thing you can control is yourself. Like the only thing you can control is yourself. You control how you see things. You control how you react to things. You control how things affect you, you know? And you take this ownership because you're so tired of fighting. And like as a kid, that's when the kids kind of probably like go into something like, when for me, I would like go to church or something like that and really just like, you know, pray like, okay, God, please just like help me like understand this, help me get through this. I know I'm only like 16 or whatever, but I have 2 more years where I have to listen to these people. And I was just frustrated. I was burnt out. So that's what I did. I prayed and then I joined the military, right? And then the whole thing started over again because I thought I was leaving a situation that never left me, right? Like I didn't truly fix what was inside of me. So it's in a whole different like area, in a whole different environment, the same issues came up. You know, I went from feeling hopeless to being that fighter to going to like the creator and like turning inwards and seeing what in me I needed to change. So I had all this happen and I'm just like, okay, like I was the problem child. Like, why do people think problem children are so bad? Like, they're really not. Like, I think about when I was a kid and I was just like grateful, like, because number one, problem children have courage. Like, problem children, they're not people pleasers. Like, they seriously just want things to be better, but they don't know how to express that. Children shouldn't like have to make things better, but like that's just in their nature. Like they're innately good, you know? Like there's not one child who is like innately evil unless it's like something that's like they've grown up with, or that like they've just been conditioned to like in their childhood, like from 1 to whatever. But children, like like the core of every child, like the core of every person is good, you know? It's just we create all this drama and like excess stuff, like condition wise. So it's like when your child is like innately good, but they see all these bad things and they're just reacting basically how they were taught to, their conditions, right? So they go from hopeless and scared to fighting. You know, that may not be fighting back, but like for some kids, I know like I was in school, some kids actually did fight back. I was just like a verbal fighter, but I was like, I didn't realize that what I was doing was like upsetting other people outside of me. That wasn't my purpose. Like my purpose was just to say like something is wrong. You know, like problem kids are just there to tell you that something is wrong, either with them, like at home, or like with like something like where they're at, you know, like something is wrong. So it's like our job as parents to like look at that and like see it for what it is. It's like a cry for help. Like problem children are asking for help. They're not trying to like make things worse. You know, I was never trying to like ruin someone's life. I was literally just so upset that my life seemed to be like so crazy. And so what did I do? I fought back. Like, you know, once I couldn't fight back anymore, then I was like, okay, let me just like do some drugs. I was a bad kid, I'm not gonna lie, but I was like seriously just like trying to make myself better and not knowing how. And so like we get this idea that problem kids are like have something out to get someone, or they're trying to prove something. And like in a way maybe, but I feel like most problem children are literally just trying to like change the world in a better place in the only way that they know how. Like I said, when you're a kid, you're like confined to what everyone else tells you to do, so you feel hopeless. And then the only thing that you're really taught or engaged to do is like fight back. Find some way to like act out. Find some way to get someone's attention so that they can like come and ask you what the problem is. You may not even know what the problem is, but it's like you just want to like show the world that there's something better out there. Like there's a better way to do something. There's a better way for something to be. And right now it's just not right. And I think like problem children should be like praised for that. You know, I'm not saying that they should be condoned what they're doing. The bad things shouldn't be like condoned, right? But it's like we have to see it for what it is. And like us as adults, we get triggered by it. Like, let's just be honest, we're human. We get triggered by it. We end up like thinking that, you know, oh, something that someone else's kid is doing is like quote unquote bad. But it's like really just a trigger for us, right? And so it's like we have to really like look at ourselves and say, okay, like if I'm triggered by a child, like I should really look at myself and be like, why? You know, like this is a kid. They're like a good kid. It's like, I don't believe that there are bad kids. That's crazy. They're like kids who are going through things who need help, but they're not bad, you know? And it's the same thing for me when I was like in high school to in the military. Like I was never bad. I never wanted to like hurt anyone. I never wanted anything like bad to happen to anyone. I was just like trying to like figure out why things weren't right. And that's like where the progression of like problem kids leads to. And like what I believe is that like problem kids, like their problems when they're teenagers or whatever, and then it's like when you grow up the same problem happens, and it's like this continuation. You can look back and see the cycle, and when you look back and see the cycle, you realize like, wow, like there's a solution. And sitting in that discomfort, like being bold enough to say that there's something wrong, being bold enough to be the one to stand up to people who maybe like quote unquote are over it or like authority over you or whatever, and you know that it's wrong, then it's like you're at least stepping up and you're at least like asking for a solution, whereas everyone else is just going along with it. So that's like my third thing that I think is awesome about problem kids, is that we're bold enough to ask for a solution. Like if you don't ask for something, you're not going to receive it. Just like if you don't admit to the fact that something isn't working, you're not going to fix it or correct it to make it work for you later on. So problem kids really have this way of like going from problem to like problem solver. Because if it weren't for us, if it weren't for the people who stood up and said, hey, this isn't working, hey, this isn't working, right? Obviously, there's a way to do it, and there are extremes to both sides, but doing it in a way, like for me, I just did it for myself. Like I didn't know how else to do it. I was just like, hey, this isn't working. I would be someone else's reflection of like their shadow, and I didn't know what that meant. Like it was basically just saying that whatever like they had that they were trying to ignore, for some reason, I would pick up on it and like project it back to them, not even knowing that it was like kind of like this gift that I had, but it felt like a curse at the time, right? Because everyone was mad at me because I was like reflecting this shit back to them that they didn't want to look at, so they just like got even more mad at me. But it's like after we're like, you know, separated or whatever, they're like, oh my God, you know, like they still really care about me and they still know that I'm a good person, because it's like after I was gone, they were able to see the lesson that came there. And I'm not saying this to say that, oh, I'm like better than anyone. I'm not saying this to say that problem children are better than anyone. That's not the case, right? It's just that like we have this idea that like problem children, you know, oh, ooh, that kid is bad, whatever, whatever. Well, I'm just here to tell you, like, I was a bad kid. I was a good kid when I was super young, but like as I got older and like went to school and everything, like I was a bad kid too, because there were just things that weren't working that I didn't know how to say. And let's be honest, like you're not going to listen to a kid. Like no one was listening to me if I was 6 or 7 saying, hey, this isn't working. You know, hey, the way you're disciplining me isn't working. Hey, the way that this is going on in school isn't working, right? You can't say that like as a child and actually be taken seriously. So it's like I only acted out in the way that I thought would actually get the results that I needed. So problem children are super smart, you know, like they're bold, they're smart. They're like here to make pretty much like a positive change. It's just that when they're younger, they're the ones that like, you know, quote unquote are problem children because they're not people pleasers. So don't take what I'm saying as saying like, oh, you know, problem children are better than this. So that's not the truth, right? I'm sure there are plenty of amazing kids who like have their own way of changing the world for a better place too. But so do problem kids. And even though they're problem quote unquote kids, right, then that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. They're literally just trying to like make the world a better place in their own way. And they're really just trying to show you that, hey, something's not quite working, but there's a better way. And it just goes to show like when you think of like finding a solution to any problem, you don't usually find it whenever you're like ignoring the problem, right? So like problem children bring in that aspect of discomfort to make you actually look around to see what the problem is versus just ignoring it before. So I know I was really good at that when I was a kid, and it was probably one of those things where it was like, you know, like I said, people at the time were frustrated with me, but once I like left, you know, and like came back, it was like, oh, hey, how are you? How are you doing? You know, like they know that problem children are innately good. It's just in that time it's frustrating. In that time it's hard. We trigger people. We make people think in a different way that makes them uncomfortable. We like most of the time have our own agendas, and that frustrates people too who are trying to like do something like say like be our teachers, be our like leaders when we're like these free spirits who are like, no, this isn't work. No, this isn't work. It's just crazy, but it's like really cool at the same time, because since I went through all that and I see like how those like situations of not being quote unquote the good kid, of like, you know, being going against what was right and like having such a contrast and like attitude and everything, I can see how like people who are like genuinely hurting can act out and like help them in a way that other people couldn't, you know? Because it's like I've been there, I've done that, like I see that, like the kid I was sticking up for, I stuck up for him because I was like, I used to be that kid, you know? I was like, I can see how he's annoying right now, but like he's a good kid, I know, you know? Especially since I know that kids are innately just like reflections of what we're looking for, right? And it's not always intentionally, sometimes it's just like an assumption. And something as little as an assumption for a kid can be like such a huge deal, because kids are so open and they can like really tune into those things that we think like we're ignoring, we're taught to ignore, we're taught to kind of like shut down. But kids are like, they have like much more intuition and much more like emotion than what we ever like, what we like really have given ourselves the capacity to have from like being a busy society and everything. So I just wanted to say, yeah, problem kids are awesome. They have like a bold place in this world and they do amazing things. So if you have a problem kid, just like ask yourself what's wrong. Ask yourself like, what could this be stemming from, and like what's it a reflection of? Because most of the time if it's your child, it's something in you that you may be ignoring or that you may be like trying to numb. So if that's something that you're worried about, then just go ahead and ask yourself that and give yourself a little bit of grace, because you and the kid, like, I feel like kids and parents grow together in a way, you know, like we're here to guide our kid, but our kid also like guides us in a way, you know? So like have that humility, have that like bond with your kid, and don't ever like label your kid a problem kid and feel hopeless, because I was a problem kid and I promise you I turned out awesome and I'll never forget it. Like I'll never forget it. I'll never like think anything less of problem kids just for that reason, right? I'm sure in like 6 or 7 years when Elijah's a little older, I may be like, oh my God, what was I thinking, right? But it's just triggers, right? Like we're human, we're going to learn in different ways. We're going to have like different experiences, and that's just okay. So here's to all the problem kids, and I just wanted to share that with you guys, okay? Thanks, Elizabeth. You too. Let me know when you're back in San Diego.